My question is, well, I'm thrilled that, I can be a Battlestar Galactica fan and that's, more accepted and applauded now. But I kind of have a question on the opposite end, do you see maybe why, I think there's even more stereotype against boys or men liking things that have been traditionally, women's stuff. Like, why does a movie that's intended to appeal to 10-year-old boys have to have only one female character? Or, why do boys feel embarrassed, maybe picking up, action fantasy novel that is mainly about a girl as the hero? Do you think that's just a cultural thing, or do you think there's things we can incorporate into, maybe traditionally female stories that would make them appeal more to men, just as we're talking about incorporating things into traditionally male stories to make it appeal more to women?
Very interesting. I haven't thought on that.
I have a 34-year-old male straight friend who's a Twilight fan, and I'm sorry, I'm never going to live it down. but I think it's crossing both barriers. It's being more acceptable that females are sci-fi fans, and it is getting more acceptable that males like things that are more girly. It's going to just become a broader and broader spectrum as time goes on. It's an evolutionary thing as, things become
And I think the internet is going to be, in the World of Warcraft, these online games where you don't know the actual gender of the person you're playing with. And so I think I do think it's cultural, but I think there's a chance for a boy to create. A friend of mine who got me hooked on Xbox, he said, I made the hottest elf you've ever seen. And he played this girl elf through all of Dragon Age. So I think that, and as that happens at younger and younger ages, then I think there'll be less discomfort with, well, I can't identify with a girl in the story, I need to identify with a boy. So I think we're seeing a cultural change that's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next 10 to 15 years.
Comment about a comment that one of you guys made earlier, that women want to see relationships. And I kind of want to argue in a totally respectful way that men want relationships too. It's just that, they have their hero relationship with their nemesis, and their relationship with their sidekick, and their relationship with, their love interest. But, with Battlestar Galactica, my father and I are both huge fans of Battlestar Galactica. And we'll sit there and we'll talk for hours about the technology and how it's so cool and how, one day Earth people can figure out how to do that. And then we'll sit there and we'll talk for even more hours about the relationships in the show. And, you've got Lee's relationship with his father, you've got Gaius' relationship with Six, you've got Boomer versus Athena. They're the same person, but they're not the same person. What's going on? And my father, who's a man, and me, who's a woman, will sit there and we'll talk for hours on end about that. And the difference there, I think that it appeals to both men and women, where in other traditional sci-fi it doesn't, is that those relationships in traditional sci-fi are demeaning to women. And then in that particular instance, and then a lot of other sci-fi that I think is cross-gender that appeals to both, is where it's not. It's something that both men and women can relate to, and something that both men and women can freely and openly talk about. And how do we get more of that? How do we get, the industry to realize, hey, this is something that guys like too, that's not demeaning to women.
Better writing.
I want you to write something. Very exciting.
When you were talking, I was just thinking, clearly I have to start watching Battlestar Galactica.
Jamie wanted to say something. Yeah, I want to tell you that I sat in that writer's room for, a long time, and it was always me and all those boy writers, and that's what we spent hours and hours talking about, was those relationships, and all those guys were totally invested in it. And I think there was a lot of truth in what you were saying. I heard something interesting once, and I don't know if it's true. Maybe it's not, but somebody told me once that they looked at the studies that say men and women's brains are different, and they compared them to all the studies that say men and women's brains are actually functionally exactly the same. And there was a difference, that they found a statistical difference between the two studies, and it had to do with the gender of the person doing the studies. So it may very well be that we have put up artificial barriers between what men are interested in and what women are interested in We may all be communicative and interested in relationships, and we're only just now sort of uncovering that.
I usually talk about women in fantasy and sci-fi. It tends to be the ones that are mentioned are ones where a female character sort of is in conflict with gender norms or sort of defying them in a contemporaneous way, or there's just like a world where those gender norms that are around now don't exist. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on which, like, the merits of both of those sort of changing all of this.
Well, what I can speak to actually is something that came up at the Sanctuary panel today, because Amanda Tapman's character that she plays, Helen Magnus, is different than her Samantha Carter character on Stargate, which is a very non-sexual character, and yet Magnus has never gotten laid on Sanctuary. And so one of the things that they were talking about, which is something we talk about all the time on the show, and one of the writers, Gillian, is here, so she can attest to it, is that Magnus needs to get laid. Because it is, it's true, we have these idealized, strong women, and we do grab a bit of their sexuality away from them sometimes, and I think that the really strong women are the ones who are in control of that too, and who understand that side of themselves as well.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, but I want to thank Melinda, Erica, Jamie, Katie, Mary, Ashley,